Hello guys. Alright, today we're going to talk about plot. And this is a concept that you should already be familiar with, but I'm going to talk about it in the context of the reading that you had and also um, in terms of the level you're in now. And what plot is the series of events that happen in a story. Any good story should have different levels. And when I say different levels, I'm talking about different intensity, different emotions. You don't want a story that is always exciting because then the story becomes boring. You're always excited throughout the story. You don't want a story that is always sad because again, the story will become boring because you're always sad. You know exactly what's going to happen next. You know that you're going to be sad next. So reading is not a surprise. It becomes monotonous. So you want in a story to have different levels of emotion, different intensities. You want to feel excited in some part. You want to feel sad in another part. You want to feel happy. You want to feel angry. You want to experience different emotions. And this is where a good plot comes in. Basically, as I said before, a plot is a sequence of events in a story, and there are five parts to a plot. All right. The graph for plot looks a little bit like this, okay? And this is going to represent the different levels of intensity of the story. At the beginning of the story, you should start very slow, and this is where you start introducing your characters and your settings. This is called the exposition. And as I said before, this is where you introduce your characters, the settings, and the setting is nothing but the where and the when of the story. So you would include in what period of time the story happened, in what uh, like in what type of world it happened, and if it's a futuristic world, if it's a past world, if it's um, a real world or an imaginary one, things of that sort. It is usually here where you introduce the conflict. And the conflict is something that is going to be happening throughout the story. Basically, the conflict is an opposition between two forces. In the story, you're going to have two forces that are usually fighting against each other. Something that is opposing the other. It could be good and bad. It could be anger and calmness. It could be anything. So it's always two opposing forces. All right, and these two opposing forces we called a conflict. Okay, and this conflict is usually introduced right here in the exposition. You could start by introducing only one side of the conflict, or you can start by introducing both sides of the conflict. After that, you want to start elevating your story. You want to start elevating the intensity of your story, and you're going to do that with what is called the rising action. And the rising action is simply an interesting event that happened that happened in the story. Um, this event usually leads to a change in the story. This event usually um, motivates the main characters to do something different than normal. So, say for example, I could start by having a boy named John walking down the park, and I'm already telling you what characters I'm having in the settings. You already know that one of my characters is John, and the place in which he's in is the park. So you already have the setting. The rising action would be something exciting that happens to John. I haven't introduced the conflict yet because all I said is John is walking in the park. But if I introduce something exciting, something interesting that would happen to him in the park, that would represent the rising action. Now you need to know what the conflict is because the next part of the plot is the climax. And the climax is the best part of the story. It's usually when the conflict is, I wouldn't say resolved, but the conflict is overthrown, or the bad force is overthrown by the good force. Usually, um, the conflict disappears because the best part or the good thing happens to the main character. So if, for example, this John was walking down the park because he was thinking about um, financial problems that he has, the rising action could be that he sees a person having an accident. All right, he sees something interesting, something different in his life. There's a person on the street having an accident. He decides to go and help that person. The climax would be that once he saves the person from the accident, the person offers him a a briefcase full of money in gratitude for him saving him from the accident. That would be the climax. So the climax is when the main character, or in the story, something good happens, something extraordinary, something extra good happens. That usually leads to the falling action. And the falling action is but a consequence of the climax. So let's say that John, after he gets his briefcase full of money, decides to go to the bank and pay all his debts, or he decides to invest that money in the stock market. So the direct consequence of the climax is what represents my falling action. And after that, what we have is the resolution. And what the resolution is the emotional state of the main character, or the emotional state of the entire story after everything has happened. At the beginning, John was walking in the park because he was sad, or he was preoccupied by his financial situation. After he saw the accident and he saved the person and he received the briefcase full of money, and he decided to go to the bank and pay his debts, or to invest the money in the stock market, his mood changes from being nervous, anxious, and sad to being happy and excited. And so the resolution talks about the change of emotion from the beginning of the story to the end of the story. Okay? So try to take this exercise and think about the Harrison Bergeron story, and try to identify where is the exposition, where is the rise in action, where is the climax, falling action, and resolution. Because in every good story, the plot is going to move that way. It's going to go from very bland to a little bit more exciting, to extremely exciting, to a little bit less, and to the resolution, which is usually the happy ending. All right? Okay, guys, that's everything I want to teach you about plot for today.